Anime in 2022 was a fairly mixed bag. A lot of what aired this year were season 2s and a few remakes of older shows, which meant that there's a lot that wasn't actually new. While it may have been rough times, there were still a few gems worth mentioning. So it's time to talk about my highlights from the past year, and hopefully remind a few people of what they missed. Because when I do my year-end reviews, I try to go out on some positive notes, with what I think people should check out. Because these are the shows I still think about. My Dress Up Darling came out swinging in winter with an adaptation of a popular manga. A series that really encapsulates what being an anime fan is about, by showcasing the hype fandoms create, how the community comes together to celebrate its shared interests. It really is just a show about the more niche aspects of otaku culture. It manages to get me excited about cosplay from a cosplayer's perspective, while also telling an endearing love story. At first glance, Marin comes off as a little too perfect in the hot girl who's also a nerd sort of way, but her enthusiasm is infectious, as she spreads that to not just Wakana, but her cosplay rivals as well. On the flip side of that, the romance works incredibly well too, because the two leads support one another to grow and pursue their interests in a healthy way. The relationship is surprisingly wholesome for the introductory cosplay that brought these two together being from a porn game. And that was the real foundation of this anime. Cloverworks did an excellent job with their animation, using a variety of styles and detail to amp up the moments that make the audience fall for these characters. They're usually really good at visual storytelling, but some of the key moments in this series were an absolute treat. Kaijin Kaihatsubu no Kuroitsu-san is a series that was built for Sentai and magical girl fans. This is a love letter to those genres through and through, by its clever use of tropes to poke fun at the genres in question. Not because the concept of transforming heroes is goofy, but more the hyper-commercialization of them as a concept. I love how it used the tropes of the secret evil organizations and local heroes always stopping them as a launchpad to show how these businesses run, and why they focus on such small-scale towns for the sake of launching their evil empires. The titular Kuroitsu isn't in this for the money, despite that being what it usually comes down to. She's actually in this because she loves the monsters she makes, an analog for the series itself. Comedy comes organically through that lens, as business talks about monster budgets, failed research plans, launching toys for protagonists, and even dipping into the lives of the retired players in the hero economy. Hell, a side plot is following two women wrapped up in temp jobs as henchmen, as they travel around the area getting their asses kicked. It packs this sort of meta humor with an incredible eye for detail, using whatever local hero's theme song and animation to end the episode on. The animation for this one wasn't necessarily great, in fact it fell slightly below average, but what it lacked for in style it made up for with raw passion, and I was here for it this year. This was certainly a hidden gem, and one that needed a bit more love. I loved Machikado Mazoku from this season, and seeing it return this year was a welcomed addition to the lineup. Seeing the adventures continue after Shamiko declared to Momo that she'd make her submit to her to help her find her sister, where Shamiko's now working a part-time job, making good on her promise, and actively protecting the city showed some nice mobility in this franchise for its story. Definitely one of my favorite slice-of-life comedies, as it still manages to have an engaging plot, one that I'm excited to see continue, but not one every moment has to revolve around because the cast is simply that interesting. The humor in this series is a treat, with a mixture of self-depreciating, slightly dark, but juxtaposed with cute characters and a naive optimism that makes for more than a few laughs. It punctuates that with visual humor, and a style that plays up the silliness while playing into the cuteness to create an overall charming experience. JC's staff did a nice job on this one, by utilizing a more manga-inspired approach to their adaptation. It worked quite well to create an overall fun and memorable package, one I'm excited to see if it'll get a third season or not. My channel has become fairly Bookworm-centric, and it's certainly controversial to readers of the light novel to put the most recent season on this list, but Ascendance of a Bookworm's third outing, while cutting the story, still managed to hook many viewers, which I view as a positive, as it's doing its job as an anime, marketing the light novels. This season showed us just how large this world is, demonstrating its excellent world building and characters, capping the whole experience off with a strong climax that moved many viewers to tears, as Mind's entire world took a drastic shift, leaving her comfortable life behind. Ajia Do's adaptation of this franchise is a bit of a mixed bag, as it strikes the hard balance of including small parts from the light novels, streamlining the story into an animated medium, and getting some striking visuals with their detailed illustrations. While the anime's budget didn't stretch as far as many would have liked it to, it accomplishes its goal and strives to put effort in where it matters, that being the setting for this series. The greatest achievement this season accomplished was bringing in more readers into the light novels, as it left off at a powerful cliffhanger that won't let audiences remain waiting. So because it was so well received and growing the fandom, it certainly earned its place here. Tomodachi Game was incredibly interesting when it debuted, taking a fairly idealistic setup of a group of friends who are super close, but flipping the script and delving deep into the depths of the human experience by showing how to turn that dynamic against the main characters. Friends are a good thing, but in this anime, they're also the ones who are most likely to backstab you, because when their life is on the line, they're not going to prioritize yours. The anime embodied what a good psychological story is about. Using small devious setups to allow the core cast to shine in their underhanded tactics meant to stealthily deceive the others. It becomes a giant guessing game of who's the bad guy, as the friends we're introduced to all have darker parts they don't tell the others about. Why, how, and who? That's part of the fun for the audience. It's a stellar example of how to use smart characters well, rather than relying on the typical genius stereotypes that amount to plot armor, as the main character doesn't really play by the rules to come out on top. The studio behind this took the angle of being a bit more abstract, and utilizing an almost horror aesthetic to sell the mood and tension in the series. That worked incredibly well, as it comes off as creepy, unsettling, and has the audience second guessing everything they know, since not just the game runners but the players too, all have a back and forth on who has the upper hand. This series had me thinking, and constantly surprised. Lycoris Recoil was one of the shows in 2022 that stood out among the rest, capturing a variety of genres, telling a compelling story, and doing so with style, mixing action and slice of life to build a mystery while allowing the characters room to develop and grow on the audience, with ultimately a bigger plot than the core cast getting wrapped up in and having to solve. The friendship between Takina and Chisato is both wholesome and powerful, as the two are raised as government assassins and find out what a close friendship means when they had no real connections before. That was the glue that held together the terrorist plot to take down the government playing out in the shadows, with how they're connected to it, and ultimately cracking the case. Polishing that out with stellar action scenes with intense gunfights, utilizing not just great camera work, but also amazing fight choreography to sell the pacing. The series was certainly full of eye candy. Even moments where it slowed down, let the animators tell the story visually in subtle but powerful ways, which sells this as a labor of love on not just the studio's part, but also the director's. This is possibly easily dismissed as some Yuri bait action show, but that would be a disservice on anyone's part, as this was a rare, complete package sort of show. It didn't just have a strong story, but a good cast that I cared about. Maid in Abyss finally had its return this year, and the fanfare wasn't just deafening, but well deserved. Picking up after the Dawn of the Deep Soul movie, this season carried the cinematic torch that this series has been praised for since its debut. Its powerful sound design, music underscores, and breathtaking imagery sell the vastness of this world. And looking at the deadly sixth layer of the titular abyss, where the haunting remnants of a lost civilization rest, with unsettling new residents finding refuge among the debris in a village that has its own terrible past lying just beneath the surface. Every new answer in this series spins off into entire storylines worth of content that grow the world bigger and more interesting, while keeping the same optimistic innocence in the face of otherwise depressing horror. It's no wonder why this franchise traps audiences like the Abyss itself, as the anime perfectly captures the cute and horrifying elements. Kinemon Citrus is the right studio to handle this adaptation. Building cute with strong artwork and world designs has been an outstanding part of their repertoire for a number of years. Maid in Abyss is a franchise that always stirs something within me, a mixture of awe and anxiety, and it always keeps me coming back. Akiba Maid War was one of the most unique shows of this year, combining the cutesiness of maid cafes with a criminal underground that thrives off violence and underhanded tactics to survive. It broke out of the typical mold. Being part dark comedy, part gang thriller, each episode bore an almost Mad Lib style absurdity that strove to be as over the top as possible while playing the whole thing absolutely straight. Characters doing the typical maid cafe things, like pop idol choreographed dance routines for their customers, were a scene away from someone being unceremoniously shot and killed, only to be dragged away or propped up for the remainder of the scene. That abrupt shift was part of the punchline. Whether you're meant to laugh or be morbidly curious about how this series is meant to resolve itself is mostly left to the audience due to its deadpan delivery, made it fairly endearing in what would have otherwise been a series of whiplash-inducing tonal shifts. On that front, it had enough quirkiness to ink itself out as a unique comedy, but how the anime approaches its core cast lives and the story itself bore the same irreverent callousness, as the line between making the audience care and what's meant to be poking fun at how off the wall it is blurred, to the point that it's almost part of the joke. Objectively, it's a comedy, but how it approaches its humor and storytelling were on another level. Even if the story itself isn't that hard to follow, due to its delivery, I think about this show a lot, because I was never quite sure what I was meant to take away from it, but that also felt very intentional. BOCCHI the Rock was a stellar example of a slice-of-life comedy this year due to how much effort was put into this series. On the surface, an introvert trying to be a rock star isn't that engaging, but the relatableness to the character as she struggles with anxiety and socialization while along that path made her more endearing to the audience. BOCCHI isn't just an introvert, she's a classic example of someone who's lonely and trying to reach out, but she just doesn't really know how to and she's scared. It shows how different friend groups form and mingle, with introverts, extroverts, and how those generalizations differ wildly amongst themselves, from shy to loner, and outgoing versus confident. The humor was built off this premise, that the anxiety and selfishness that drives BOCCHI is relatable to the audience, but self-aware, that BOCCHI herself understands her own flaws to the point that she melts into a puddle over her own shame, or just being overloaded. I mentioned that this series was high effort, and it's because of the great lengths the studio went to making this series stand out visually, using a variety of different art styles and even mediums to sell the visual elements to jokes, but even going above and beyond to sell some of the more emotional scenes in this series. Like something as small as BOCCHI managing to finally look up and see the crowd in front of her for her first live show, or realizing that she needs to help her bandmates salvage their performance by going all out on guitar. It ranges from clever visual gags to downright beautiful and artistic at times. An absolute joy. There's almost not much to say about Bleach when it returned this year. This is a monolith to a generation of anime fans, being a prolific series that stood at the peak of shonen when it was at its height. It had a long-running anime adaptation that spoke to teenage fans, while offering a darker and more moody experience than most of its contemporaries at the time. However, the anime series ended long before the actual source manga did, meaning there were hundreds of chapters in the series climax, not in anime form. This year marked the return, as the series came out swinging with a modern update to the animation, without drastically changing the art direction. By eliminating filler and allowing the series to hit natural conclusions and cliffhangers for episodes, outside the chapter or two per episode constraint it previously endured, we had a blistering pace that kept the excitement high, with excellent fight choreography and animation that stood out this season. This wasn't just a nostalgia trip, it was a return to form that left viewers begging for more. The long-awaited conclusion to Mob Psycho 100 hit hard in fall this year. Capping off the series in an emotional way, we've seen Mob go from an insecure boy struggling with his immense power and family life, to a confident young man who attracts friends to him, not because of his psychic powers, but because he has a magnetic personality that people actually enjoy. I think that's why this series withstood for me, and how it continuously improved with each passing season. It's not necessarily the series of events I'm invested in, but Mob himself, as he embodied the notion of character progression critics love so much. It's the fact that he lives such a normal, fulfilling life despite his talents, and he chose not to let that define him. That's a running theme in one's work, but the series exemplified that throughout its run. It wasn't a gimmick that Mob didn't see value in his damn near omnipotent psychic powers, but they never actually got him what he actually valued himself, and he's confronted that in one way or another in every single arc of this series. But this season saw him having to confront himself with that ideology. This anime has always been a much deeper emotional package than its shonen battle wallpaper might suggest, and for that, it's an absolute masterpiece of a series, from start to finish. Anime in 2022 had its share of highs and lows, but on the whole, the series that were good were exceedingly so. Comedy, action, drama, each had a series that shined this year, leaving me with an optimistic look. And what I've talked about is by no means a conclusive list. These are just some of the things that came to mind for me, leaving me with an optimistic outlook as we enter 2023. Tell me your thoughts down below. What series did you love this year? I'd like to hear it. For now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with the link down in the description, and if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks. And speaking of, I'd like to give a special thanks to Rob and DBL for their continued support. Thanks for watching.